details. Don't you know it's gotta be? Pay attention to the details. Don't you know it's gotta be me? I know that you are right for me, and I know that I will always be paying attention to your little details.
We are back with another edition of the CWE podcast. As you can see, our surroundings have changed. We're too vulgar, we're too obscene, we're too... What was the CWS? We're too extreme, we're too violent, too effing bad for Hooters.
I thought they were too untrained.
A little bit of that too. We've been removed from Hooters. Kevin can get into that a little bit. So now we've been put into the closet, Travis's proverbial closet, to discuss some professional wrestling. We're a little crowded here. We've got an all-star panel. We've got a big panel. It's getting a little too tight in here. We've got special guest, the Outlaw Adam Knight, joining us this week. My brand new kitten, who's unnamed as of right now. We're going to give him a big push and plug on Facebook and social media tomorrow and get him over.
Let's get a name for this cat.
We just get a name for the cat. We got the mastermind Kevin Cannon, yours truly hotshot Danny Duggan, the hot prospect Travis Cole. It's getting hot in the closet. Robert, Garbage Man Rob in the house, and Chris joining us.
Hey, how's it going, guys? Before
we get started, maybe because you're wrestling fans might not be familiar with who you are, but I've done some work with you recently on some of your projects, so maybe you can give yourself a quick intro and tell us a little about yourself and your work.
Well, I'm a web series creator who also makes short films and the odd feature here and there. A lot of YouTube shorts, viral type stuff, a lot of parodies. Just about every kind of genre at this point I've covered, except dramatic or boring. I often don't care what my genre is, as long as it's not boring and as long as it's fun. You can find my stuff all over YouTube. I've got 3 or 4 channels and a Daily Motion channel, dailymotion.com/Chad Media, which covers pretty much the entire spectrum of what I do. YouTube.com/WatchVenusSpa, YouTube.com/SuperFunky2012, and YouTube.com/DoubleAgents. Danny, you've been in a couple with me so far. You were in our what's it called? Our horror web soap opera parody called The Young and the Undead.
Yes.
And you haven't been killed yet.
That was my 3rd one for you, so I'm putting up some numbers and getting more involved in your web series. So that means I'm getting a 4th one if I haven't been killed off yet.
Yes, you will survive to live to see another episode.
I'll let you know that me doing web series is much like wrestling. I don't do jobs, so I'm not going to be dying anytime soon. I need a good run and put on top first, and then we can consider.
The girl I know is watching, so I can't. The difference is you're not the booker of his web series. That's why you started CWE.
But the one that probably got the most traction, that most people probably seen, and certainly got reported in some of the sheets even, was when you played Danny Hasselhoff, son of the legendary David Hasselhoff, in my Baywatch parody Beach Blanket Lucha.
I'm looking forward to the sequel.
That, when we get some weather, we're going to blow the doors off.
Maybe we need the winter series, beach winter time.
It would have to be I would say ski buddies and machine guns.
If I keep growing out this chest hair, I'll be able to keep nice and warm.
Wait, you're not going to do Beach Blanket Lucha Nights? Like,
you know, if we can do some crazy paranormal crap, I'm all for it.
So, before we jump into the meat potatoes of some of the stuff we're going to be discussing today, we've had some emails and some messages. People just wanting some background on CWE, background on some of the wrestlers here, because there are a lot of people that jump on the CWE train that are new every single day. So even though a lot of people that have heard a million podcasts and they've heard me answer these questions a million times, and probably guys like yourself as well that have done these, people just want a little bit of background on some of the wrestlers in the room and how they got started in professional wrestling. And seeing you started well before any of us, not to age you, maybe you could maybe you could kind of start
my hair does that enough. It's all right.
Maybe talk about your start in professional wrestling, how you got started, why you got started.
Back in 1995, which is before Travis was born, and
I'm not that young.
Before I was before Kevin was born. That's right.
I was out of high school by then.
That's right. Well, I was out of high school by then, but I ran into a couple of buddies of mine at university who were starting to get back into wrestling after the wrestling boom in the fall and things like that. I always sort of kept my ear to the ground about it, but I'd never heard of local wrestling. Went to a show, myself, Chad, and Jay. We got involved with the original River City Wrestling. I got to watch the Men Without Pants wrestle. I got to watch my first 2 to 3 Falls match live. And that same day, I got interviewed by Brother Midnight himself, and we got to talk about, what do you like about wrestling? What is it that you want to do with it? Where do you see yourself going in wrestling? And apparently I saw myself going 20 years later to sitting in a closet in the back of the gym with 4 other fags, and we're going to sit here and talk about how I got started in wrestling. So that's what we talk about. No, it's not quite it. I got some interesting training. I got the absolute living piss beat out of me for about 6 or 7 months, and then they put me in a ring, and then they kept beating the piss out of me for another 3 to 4 years. But it's been a hell of a ride, and 20 years later I've had quite the career. I've been pretty much all across Canada, through most of the Midwest. I've been to the tri-state area, wrestled in Chicago, wrestled in Japan 7 times. I've had a good run. Still having a good run.
I don't want to jump ahead here, but you mentioned something that I kind of want to talk about with you, because you're one of the last of a class where people still got the shit kicked out of them in training.
Yes.
And that's something that is now discouraged. People look down upon it. We're in a different generation now, where if you do that, people might call the police on you. It's not acceptable to get into a training center and beat the shit out of somebody and instill that respect for the business in them. And because of that, the business has probably been hurt in many ways, because you can't go about it the old school way, brother, and take care of it. What are your thoughts on that as somebody that went through that yourself? Is it something that's necessary, or is it something that has passed us by?
I've often said that I am like that rare guy. I'm in the generation between 2 generations, right? Where if I'd broken in even 5 years earlier, the territories would still be alive and well, and I probably would have had a different career and a different career path than I had. As a result of that, I was breaking in just as like the internet was becoming a thing, and I got my first email in '96. If you think about it, right? It's fucked up. But I didn't know what to do with it, and the whole business totally changed. And then things became more wide open, and suddenly it's like I could read Dave Meltzer's thing on the internet, and people got to learn all about it, and I could go on and on about how the world of wrestling has changed. But in many ways, the most important aspect is probably the fact that just about any Tom, Dick, Harry, skinny motherfucker can get in the ring, skinny or fat. I was very fat, still am, but I had a healthy respect for pro wrestling beaten into me. Now, a lot of the guys that were beating said respect into me never drew a dime, never went anywhere, and probably shouldn't have been throwing the potatoes they were throwing my way. But the ones that had were the ones with the guys I respected, who also took care of me in the process, right? Guys I will respect to the day that I die will be guys like Leatherface, guys like Bad Boy Brian Jewell, who I will, to the day I die, thank you.
Which
Thank
Leatherface, actually? Which Leatherface?
The only one that counts.
Okay. Enough for me.
Yeah, Corporal Kirschman can go fuck himself, right? He nearly killed 3 guys in Japan, no. He's a stiff motherfucker, but he always took care of me. Like Brian Jewell, oh God, I can't. There's so many guys I could name and so many guys I could thank. But quite frankly, I took a lot of ass kickings, I took a lot of shit. And anytime that I think it was over the line, I stood up for myself. And that's how you actually earn the respect. Say, no, fuck you, I've had enough. We're gonna, let's move on here. But it's getting to that point where they know, okay, now we know this guy, not only can take it physically, he can take it mentally, and he's ready to be put in spandex in front of the pain guard. He's going to tell him all the things that we're telling him right now, but he's going to be able to survive it, thrive in it, move forward, and become something with it. Like in my background, prior to wrestling, I'd done public speaking, public performances, acting, singing, all the other bullshit. But pro wrestling is the greatest combination of every aspect of live performance you could ever imagine. Live, improvised stunt work in tights that requires you to hit the gym and not look like a complete sack of potatoes. You gotta have the guts and the balls to do it. And I say balls, ladies, I have respect for you, but it's all balls. You got balls too. Just, hopefully not real, never mind.
As I think about it, as we discuss this, as we kind of go down the line here of the wrestlers on the podcast today, everybody started a little bit shortly after the others. We kind of talk about that generation gap and how the business transitioned with training as the years went on. So you trained in 95, 96, correct?
1995, I started training September 95, that's right, so I just had my 20th anniversary. I had my first actual match about 6 weeks in because they were shorter guys. They put a hood on me, threw me out, and I got pissed with that. It's fine, I was the world's largest mass jogger, but...
What was the name you worked under as the...
Oh, you wanted the...
Yeah,
you always love this, yes. The very first name I ever had in wrestling was Dr. Noah Body. It's true, 100% true. Yeah, I officially debuted, I think, December or January '96, but yeah, whatever. Yeah, ask the historians, I don't know. I lost count.
Okay, so Kevin, you trained in 1999, correct? Or
That's right. Yeah, it was 99.
And that was with Don Callis.
Yes,
Yeah.
when the wrestling boom started again.
Yes, so
When
so
about 8
so
million
the
people
business
got involved.
probably started to change a lot at that time because
Yes.
the business started to get hot. More people were interested in getting involved in the
Absolutely.
business. It was a little more accessible to get in the business. I think 1999 probably produced 100 different wrestlers in this city.
That's correct.
Kevin being one of them. So maybe you can kind of talk about your differences in training from 1996, where he was getting the shit kicked out of him, to getting in there with Don Callis, also known as Cyrus to those who followed ECW.
The Natural.
The Natural.
Natural, yeah. Natural also. Yeah, he didn't actually himself physically get in and kick the shit out of us, with the exception of chops. He was more breaking us down. Okay, in one class we did 8 weeks of 5 days a week, 4 hours a day. In one class you're probably running 7 to 8 kilometers. You're probably rattling off 300 push-ups, 300 squats, 300 sit-ups, whatever else you felt like you were doing. And anytime there was 8 of us in the class. There was initially 9. I think we might have 10.
Who was in your training class?
Myself, Playboy Will Damon, who actually him and I worked together and we kind of joined together. And then Donnie Caprio was in that class. Chris Stevens.
Dirksen.
Oh yeah,
Probably the star
Dirksen.
people.
Johnny Blade, who had one match. Yeah.
One match.
A gentleman by the name of GQ Smooth, who also had one match. He might have had 2. I think he might have done a Georgie show.
Did you do Georgie
Yeah, I
show?
think he did the first one. I think he worked Saxon on it. And
Yes.
Tim Probin. From Minnedosa, who has
Des Resner.
Yeah, Des Resner, that's correct. There was the 8 of us that officially graduated the class, and yeah, it was very physical in the sense that he made us. There was no cutting corners. There was no okay. We're just gonna come in and we're gonna kind of go over bumping our body sounds, whatever. It was like, all right, we're not getting in the ring for 2 fucking weeks and go around a couple laps around the property. And when you come back in, I want 50 pushes, 50 sit-ups, 50 squats, and here's how we. Okay, now we're gonna go into a lockup. You fuck that up, everyone. 50 push-ups, 50 sit-ups, 50 squats.
So it was more like cardio and strength intensive than it was like physically intensive of like, if you fuck
Exactly,
it up, I'm gonna punch you in the face.
No, there was no. But then every
A lot of that.
every Friday, we did a drill at dawn called the meat grinder. Where we put fiddly enough.
Travis
So-
hosts that Friday nights at our house too. I take the night off and I head out to let him do his thing.
We each take a turn. You go in the corner, and everyone else gives you 10 chops. so you're taking a total of 70 chops. Plus, if Dawn thinks you did anything throughout the week to be a bitch, that's how we quote it. If you're a bitch at all this week, I'm going to give you 10 chops as well. He wouldn't tell you what those 10 chops were for. So sometimes you step in and be like, wait, I want to give this guy his 10. You know, he wouldn't say why you got those, what you did to get those, but he said one of them is if during that drill at all, if you chopped someone else like a bitch, then you got the chops for sure from
Was
him.
there anyone that took more chops than anyone else on a regular basis?
I think it was spread. I think he just gave them to everyone all the time. And the odd time if it didn't feel like it, his hand was sore, he'd stop. Send a guy out.
Alright, that was 3.
Yeah.
Fuck it, those were like 10.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and yeah, he was very, very strict on respect. Right, he was very big on when you go to a locker room. He goes, keep your fucking mouth shut, keep your fucking ears open. The only things I want you to say is, what do you want from me? What time do you want me to be from there? And thank you. Like, that's it. Those are the only things you fucking say.
And as a booker promoter, that's something gone in today's generation.
Oh, absolutely.
100%. Like that is gone, and it blows my mind because it's such common sense and common courtesy, and
Exactly.
it's not there anymore.
And I will say, I could use more of that last part than what I got. I got a lot of the physical ass kicking, a lot of the respect for what goes on inside the ring, but I got no, okay, when you're seeing this person, you should talk this way. Or
Conduct,
I got
yeah.
no conduct.
No
Right?
conduct.
Which is, fair enough.
Yeah.
I earned myself more heat in the first couple of years because I'm like, well, that's stupid. Why are we doing that?
Oh, really? Yeah, exactly.
Why
yeah.
are you looking at me?
I find like now, like especially with a lot of the people I've dealt with or I see at shows, it's like a lot of the new generation that's breaking in. They have to be babied the whole way. Where for me as a independent contractor, if I'm booked somewhere, it's as simple as what time do you need me there. What do you need from me when I get there, and I'll follow up with that when I get there. Where if you're not holding them by the hand and say you got to come to the building at this time, they're a lost cause and they're all over the place and they're not getting things done. Nobody takes the initiative to say, hey, what do you need from me? What do you require from me? They just wait to get heat for it. Oh, I didn't know. Well, ask. You're an adult.
Yeah, it's like that in the filmmaking business as well.
It's like that in every industry.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, it is. Definitely.
There are no winners and losers in school anymore. It's there's no failing grades anymore. It's that little bullshit. It's what it is.
Every so often you read stories about in the military of commanding officers saying, like, even in war zones that they get that. Why are we doing this? No, they don't follow. Like, I'm hearing this. I'm like, you mean they're not following orders in a freaking war zone? What?
Yeah, and a lot. It's a lot of. I don't appreciate the way you talk to me. You would have never said that to Don. You know what I mean? You'd be out of the camp. That'd be it.
When I get someone giving me attitude on a set, I usually don't. I'll put up with their shit for the time being. Pardon my language, but I don't
We've been talking
talk.
about
But
fucking the fags. Now you're like, pardon my language.
but I won't call them again.
Right.
They'll call me up, say like every so often I'll get, Chris, I want to be in the next season. Blah. I just won't even respond to them. I won't engage with them. My way I
I'm very much the same way.
It basically keeps the fighting on the set to a minimum, but we all know who the bad apple is.
Right.
And we simply, it's just an unspoken thing that I say, you know what, I won't call them again. Then that person's going to find out the hard way, that people just don't call you anymore if you behave a certain way. Yeah. And that's true, and it was true with me in restaurants. When I was 16, 17 years old and a smart ass, I found myself, I wasn't working the weekends anymore all of a sudden. Now a lot of people seem to follow the attitude of it's easier to ask for forgiveness than for permission.
100%.
But again, my response has always been whatever I do from my own experience is just simply don't talk to them anymore. Let them be the diva today.
Yeah.
But then they're dead to you tomorrow. You just hang up the phone. You don't answer the emails. You don't respond to them on Facebook. Block them on Facebook if you have to. Let's get back. But you get my point. Though.
Yeah.
I mean, yes, we've come to that. I'm not returning your Facebook post.
I call it like the sense of entitlement era. Like everybody has a sense of entitlement where they feel like they've earned something.
It's
they feel like they don't need to pay their dues. They don't need to put the work in. They don't. Everything should just be handed over because who they think they are, or who they were trained by, whatever the situation may be.
Yes.
Where before I even started wrestling, when I was just a young teenage kid reffing shows, message boards were really hot with wrestling, and I didn't know any better. I was just a young kid. I'd get on there and shoot my mouth off to guys, and
Not just on the message boards.
yeah.
There's some left, but you gotta look hard.
But I was, but when I was just reffing, when I, went from being a fan to refereeing, and probably didn't even belong doing that at the time, I was pulled aside very quickly, and I was told, not even about doing it in person, if I shot my mouth off on a message board anymore, I was gonna get the shit kicked out of me. So I was like, okay, that's enough. I don't want to get beaten up. Right. So I want to still do this, and I still want to be around. Where now it's people come in, and when you're 4 months in the business, 8 months in the business, you show up.
You're 5 years in the business. Fuck off.
Exactly.
Unless you bring something to the table that nobody else is bringing, shut the fuck up. Please do as you're told.
Right.
And if you can't do that, the door's over there.
Right, and that kind of segues a little bit into like my training in the business. We go from 1999 to 2002, 2003. When I first started wrestling, I wasn't trained at all because that's the way the scene had deteriorated at the time.
Don't remind me.
My first match, I didn't belong in the ring whatsoever because I was training with River City Wrestling. Sounds familiar. But definitely the crew had changed from 1995 to 2002, 2003. So I was getting in the ring with guys that weren't qualified to be in there themselves, never mind train me. But I didn't know any better. I just wanted to be a wrestler, and they were wrestlers. I didn't know they were bad or good or whatever the case may have been. So I was thrown in the ring with these guys, and I was just living the dream.
Yeah.
And as I started to watch my matches back, I was like, that's not what wrestling is. I watched enough wrestling in my life to realize that wasn't the case. So I started training with Tomahawk Gene Swan. And people have an opinion one way or another on him as a person. He was always great to me, and he was a phenomenal trainer.
In the ring, bell to bell, fantastic.
Yes,
that's
great.
all you can say about it.
Yeah, I love Gene, and I owe my career because if it wasn't for him taking me on so young, I wouldn't have got the opportunities I did. And he was a really good hands-on trainer. He was never the bully type of trainer. He was very hands-on. He would break it down and explain it to you mentally and repetition. And if you didn't get it, he was encouraging to do it. And that went a long way for me breaking those bad habits that I was taught training with guys that didn't know what they were doing. And then you fast forward a couple years when Johnny Devine was living in town.
Yes,
and
that was a good refresher.
Yeah, so then I go and start training with Devine, and he's the complete opposite. He is a bully. He will kick the shit out of you. If you don't do it right, he'll tell you flat out, if you do it wrong again, I'm going to punch you in the face. And if you do it wrong again, he'll punch you in the face. You get it right.
Oh, yeah.
So it was a complete culture shock to me in terms of training to go from somebody so cool, calm, and collected to that. But that method also worked because
it's also very good. Like when I talk about Brian Jewell, I was 6 months in. I couldn't take a proper back bump or anything like that. And then I got 6 hours with Brian Jewell one day. I got the meat grinder from him for 6 hours.
And for those that don't know, Brian Jewell is notorious for throwing probably the hardest chop in Winnipeg wrestling.
He used to. Anyways, but no, I got a lot of that, right? And so respect was earned all the way up the line there, but it also broke me of a lot of bad habits, and there's nothing wrong with that. When Devine was in town, I was happy to get in the ring with him 3 times a week to sort of go, okay, here are the rough edges I still need to put off. And that was I would have been 9 years in at that point, maybe
Right.
10. So
And that's something else. That's a whole other area. Is guys once they start wrestling feel they don't need to train anymore.
Oh, fuck.
But that's
Fuck,
that's a
fuck.
topic for another day. Because we always need to keep training and getting better.
If I could train 3 times a week today, I would do it.
That's right. So, but to go back to like there being consequence. So I trained with Divine. It was 2005, 2006. He recommended I go train in Windsor at Scott Demore School, which was
Right
an
to go.
amazing experience for
Right
me
to
to do. And just there being accountability. You know, I was 19 years old, and I was enjoying the party life in Winnipeg. I went to Windsor. I was doing the exact same thing, and I was irresponsible, and I was immature, and I caused myself a lot of heat. And Divine sent me home. So here's a time. 2005, 2006, Demore was sending guys to TNA. He was sending them to Japan, Ring of Honor. He was sending guys all over the world.
Sent me to all Japan, yeah.
Sent you to all Japan, and I fucked up, and I got sent home, and that was a lesson I learned. And that kind of mentality is not really displayed today. It's like, oh, you fucked up. Oh, don't worry, the promoter down the street will call you.
Oh.
So you can get away with that behavior in the business now because there's always some asshole that will take you on and be like, oh, we scooped the guy from that office. Let's give him a big push and.
Let's give him a big push and give him $15. It's all good.
So in that regard, that has changed a lot since then too, because I don't think there is accountability anymore.
No.
There's a couple guys now. If I feel somebody's blatantly disrespectful and bad for the business, I have no problem going to a promoter and saying, avoid that guy, please. And there's some promoters that still uphold that,
Absolutely.
which is great. But there's also a million assholes that don't. So these guys will always kind of exist. Moving down the line. Well, the cat's passed out. We're putting him to sleep. Hopefully, we're not doing the same deal at home.
We're doing the same deal.
Trap school, you trained in which year?
2010.
2010. So you trained with Lance Storm, and I imagine it's a lot different than what we've been
Yeah,
discussing.
it's a lot different. For me, it's funny you guys talk about the physical aspect. With Lance, there's very much the psychological aspect. He's the most nitpicky person I've ever met, but I mean that is a huge compliment.
That's awesome.
You can do something great, and it's like, okay, good job, and move on. And if he doesn't say anything, well, then it was probably the shits, or he'll critique it. But I remember the first time he ever told me something I did was awesome. It pretty much made my entire day because he never over exaggerates anything. He's like, oh, that was awesome. And I was like, oh, that just made my week.
I can shit the bed the rest of the week now.
Right? So it was a lot different. The cardio was very similar with you guys as well. There was a lot of workouts and stuff like that for your first hour. You train 3 to 4 hours a day, 5 days a week, for 3 months. And it's funny how you guys mentioned the business I think has changed a lot in the sense of I started I think with like 15 or 16 guys in my class and only 7 finished.
Yeah.
It's amazing how many people will go, and I've had this conversation with other graduates before about how many guys treat it like fantasy camp.
Yeah.
These days.
Right.
Like, oh, I'm gonna pay my $4,000 and say this was a cool experience.
And then move on with my life.
Yeah.
Which is
like
ridiculous.
I think I'm the only one still working for my class.
Is that right?
Yeah.
That's
And
insane.
it's only been 5 years or.
Well, think
No,
about it.
no part-timers, like no weekend warriors or anything?
I think there's one guy who quit who's about your size, Adam Knight. He works out in the Alberta scene. He wrestled for a couple of years just squashing guys. As soon as he had to actually start having 15, 20-minute matches, I think he
This
did
is hard out here.
Yeah, and then he stopped, and I think he's starting up again the occasional booking for Squig, actually. But
I'll take your money, Squig.
But yeah, it's amazing how many guys don't treat this like an actual serious business. And
Well, it's not really that surprising. How many people spend money on a college degree and then do something completely out of that field?
yeah.
Well, you think about it. He's been running classes since 2006. How many years?
He's on
3
21
a year?
now, I think.
Yeah,
He said
21 classes, and he has 10, 12 students.
Now he's maxing out at about 16. He doesn't go any higher than that, but
Yeah.
Got a couple hundred students that he's churned out though.
yeah.
Maybe you can add a different perspective. We talk about the new age of wrestler this day breaking in the sense of entitlement era. A lot of Storm students have a stigma to them for that very reason because they come out of his camp and they go, well, I was trained by Lance Storm. And they kind of have that attitude that they're already ahead of the game over guys that have been working, and they may or may not, but they definitely exude that attitude. Is that something that I don't imagine comes from Lance necessarily, because Lance is a very down-to-earth, cool dude. Where does that come from a lot of these students? Is that just the individual themselves? Is that something they're taught in training to hold themselves a certain way? Kevin mentioned that he was taught conduct in a locker room, and for some reason or another, that's sometimes lost on a lot of these students that are coming through, and a lot of them will develop a bad rep very early on in their career for that. Where do you think that stems from?
Funnily enough, I actually dealt with that very early on when I started working for you a few years ago, actually. Mentalo. I guess he had had a few bad experiences with Lance's students over the past few months,
and I worked a couple shots with you, and I think it might have been the second day or something like that. I must have missed him on shaking hands or something like that. And he pulled me aside and said, "Hey, what's up?" And I apologized. I said, "Absolutely, there was no disrespect intended. I must have just missed you. I'm really, really sorry." And he explained that he's dealt with that lately, and there's been this perception with students sometimes that they don't go above and beyond to hold up to that context. So I made sure from then on out that I really, really went above and beyond on that to do that. So. But it's funny, you and I have talked about this recently. I won't name names or anything like that, but we were talking about, I think that a lot of people take some of Lance's lessons and it turns into entitlements a little bit. Lance is very much a guy where he wants everybody to treat this like a business.
So they should.
Yeah. And yes, you should, but at the same time, we are journeymen. We're working to improve ourselves and get better to go down the line. And you've dealt with situations with people less than a year in the business in the last little while where they felt entitled to their own hotel room or better pay or whatnot. Correct?
100%.
And
Arguments and
so I think sometimes guys take that where it's like, oh, well, treat this like a business, make sure you're getting paid properly and fairly and everything else. And that's all fine and good.
Well, guys, what you never get out of that out of training. Like I was, brought up in there. It's okay. The first time I got paid $5 for a show. Yes, $5 for a show. I was like a year in, and I was
That was like
holy
$50,
fuck.
but
I could have fucking paid my rent with that.
sorry, I was out there.
You got a slim chance of surviving this fucking podcast. Anyway, no, but where the hell was I going with that?
Getting paid $5.
Yeah, it's like when you talk about that, it's you got to be to an economy of scale, right? Are you worth what you're asking for?
Yeah.
The person who trained you is not paying your bills, and he's not justifying, what you can command. That's on you.
Yeah, his name being attached to yours, it doesn't increase
Are you
your value.
putting more asses in the seats than the other people there? And if not, then you can't ask for more money, right? If you don't have the reputation, the skill in the ring, the drawing power, you're not worth shit. I don't care who you are or where you go or where you come from. If you can't put asses in the seats, you can't command more money than me.
And that doesn't even go to rookies. That goes to name talent.
That's
that goes to
everybody.
veterans. And I, as a booker promoter, I've dealt with that a million times. Well, I've been wrestling 15 years. I deserve this much money. Yeah, but you being on my show isn't giving me X amount of dollars back in ticket return
That's right.
to justify paying you that. And a lot of guys don't understand. As a business, it's got to make sense for the employer as well and the independent contractor. And that's what I try to tell guys that are breaking into the business, because I was a road warrior very early in my career.
Yeah.
And I try to explain that, especially your first few years in the business, even past that, it's kind of like your college experience. Your wrestling school is your high school. You graduate, you go off into college, and you learn more about your trade. You get some experience in your field, so you're ready.
Develop your contacts.
Specialized
Yeah,
training.
develop your contacts, and you really hammer home, your abilities. And that's something that's lost. Everyone's like, well, I need X amount of, I'll do that all the time when I've got a spot open in the car or something. Hey, do you want to make the strip? Well, how much are they paying me? It's like, they don't know who you are down there. How would you come down there, take what you can get, bust your ass, show them you're worth something, and next time you can ask for a little bit of money.
Yeah.
When you're, your first couple of years in the business, nobody knows who you are. So nobody's going to trans you up from Winnipeg or Saskatoon or Calgary to the middle of nowhere in the United States and hope to make their money back, because they're not going to make their money back on you.
Like, it's a miracle that anybody's ever come out of Winnipeg and made money. To be honest with you, right? There's at one point in time there was in the lifetime of my career, there's been several pockets where I'm like, these guys are the best guys I've ever seen. Locally, across Canada, I've toured a lot, so I've just got to see people all over the world. So I've seen that on the independent level, you've got about the average level of talent, and that's universal. But then you get every pocket, you got like, oh, these guys are really good, these guys are really good, these guys are really good, and we have had, over the course of 20 years, several pockets of people. I'm like, fuck, these guys can really break through. Some did, some didn't. The fact that anybody has, considering that we are in the center of fucking North America, and there is nothing around us for hours in the car. Hours in the car. We might as well be in fucking Zimbabwe. Every time I talk to a promoter online or on the phone that says, we'd love to bring you in, we love your reel, we love your size, we love your experience, we saw this match we had with, so-and-so, we'd love to bring you in. Where are you from? Winnipeg. Where's that? Central Canada. Oh.
Yep, I deal with that every week. week trying to
course
find
you
new
do.
work.
Of course you do.
I dealt with that in the B movie world because there's pockets all over the place now. No one's not even genre names aren't all based in LA or New York.
No, of course not.
They got Debbie Rochon's in Halifax. Ellie Church is in Indianapolis, and Misty Monday's now in New Jersey. Those aren't exactly across the street.
No.
Like if they're all in LA, it's a little easier because then you can make one call, one flight. But now you're going through all these little airports which I've actually flown people in and I've had to deal with that.
Yeah.
Which is fine if you're getting value for money. Now you brought up making contacts when you're getting your start in the business. That also can add to your value. I've learned this just from in the filmmaking world. Is if you're the kind of person, you may not be a name or star, but if you've got all these contacts, you can bring higher caliber names with you. That can improve your value too. But you can't be an entitled pissant and have those contacts because no one's going to want to talk to you.
Listen, if I could tell you the number of times in 20 years somebody said, if you book me, I can get you so and so, and then couldn't deliver, that doesn't mean shit, right?
That's fair.
It does that works and it doesn't work at the same time. So you can't bank on that. That's going back to the I was trained by so and so.
Right.
Yeah.
That's nice. I know you've got a good fundamental because you got trained by so and so. Now shut up, get in the ring, and show me what you can do.
At the end of the day, unless you've been on television, you're not going to draw from the masses.
And by television, you basically mean Vince.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So the exception to that rule is
Yes.
putting in the work, getting on the road, grinding it out, going to these towns consistently, and getting yourself over where you're now a value to that promoter in that area. For example, I'm booked for every promoter in Minnesota now. 5 years ago, I wasn't working for anybody in Minnesota, but I continuously went down there, I busted my ass, I worked hard, and then everybody started noticing, oh, that guy's getting a little bit bigger, he's working a little hard, he's getting over.
Yeah.
So then I started getting the calls, and when they start calling you, that's when you can start asking for a little bit of money.
Absolutely. That's exactly right.
And if you believe in your abilities, whether you're 1 month in the business or 5 years in the business, I always tell these guys that are like, how do you stay so busy and where, how are you getting all these bookings? I say, when I was young, I would just go to different areas because you have to make an investment in yourself, just like you do in any business. Like you have to go pay for college, you have to pay for seminars, you have to pay for equipment. Wrestling is exactly the same way, where you get what you put in and sometimes you still don't. But I always tell you, everywhere I go work, whether it's Minnesota, Portland, Boston, wherever I would go, if I busted my ass and did what I knew I was capable of doing, there was always another booker or another promoter in that locker room. Every single time.
Absolutely.
Or one of the boys that worked for somewhere else.
They'll
And then
say,
I'd work in Minnesota, and then there's a promoter from Wisconsin on that show. So he books me in Wisconsin. Now there's a promoter from Chicago in that Wisconsin. And you start spider webbing your contacts. The next thing you know, you can start doubling up all these dates and you're staying busy. And on top of that, you're working hard, you're getting over, and in theory, if you're getting over, you're marketable to that promoter, your merchandise is now selling because the people are seeing you consistently enough to know who you are, and that's how you start making money on the independent wrestling level.
Yeah, it's not with the promoters, it's with the merch. It's with the merchandise. It's sad but true.
So we're talking about different training that we've all been through. Obviously, you two have not trained to be wrestlers, so maybe you can kind of touch base on some of your local wrestling experiences and maybe your first time going to local wrestling shows and what your impressions were, the good and the bad.
First wrestling show I went to was with my dad in Winnipeg Arena circa 1985, I think it was. It was an AWA show. I have very little in terms of memory of it. All I know is that my dad didn't take me to go see Bockwinkel and Ric Flair. The one guy my dad knew, when as soon as I'm watching, he didn't like watching wrestling very often. He didn't even like taking me to shows very often. But I'm watching, and suddenly Wally Carwell comes on to talk about Ric Flair is coming. My dad was walking by, Ric Flair? And immediately sat down.
That's what fans are now when you hear Rick Matthews is coming.
Yeah.
Maybe that's just me.
That's my reaction.
My dad and my grandpa, who was a huge AWA fan from the very early days, God rest his soul, they went to see Flair and Bockwinkel, and I missed it.
So what was your first local wrestling show outside of the big boys?
Outside of the big boys, oh, goodness, it was
But made an impression.
probably the first one I went to in a long time. The made an impression was when Primos brought Cole Cabana and Jake here. I think that was my first one that I came to that I really remembered. I went to a few before that in the 90s and early 2000s, but didn't.
You remember who those promotions might have been? Who might have been on those shows?
One of them might have been a Candelo promotion because I do remember hearing him talk to Joe Aiello a week later about it. But a lot of those years are blacked out.
I know the feeling.
I used to more follow I was a big ECW fan back in the 90s. I would go across the street from the WOW to Network's Internet Cafe.
Yes.
And I would watch the the old ECW Hardcore TV from, I guess, their local television show in Philadelphia that they put online. And I would watch that. Like that's how I learned to just about everything. I was never a Cactus Jack fan until I saw his promos on ECW, and then saw his matches on ECW, and I was like, holy shit, this is fun. And especially his promos. I always loved Nick Swole. But after a while, after ECW kind of mainstreamed, I started following other lesser promotions that weren't quite ECW. I got dragged into the internet drama that was XPW.
I have some of those DVDs still for sale on my merch table.
But I learned to really like Messiah, so I tried to follow him a little bit. I watched some of his Combat Zone shows. I found myself watching a lot of promotions out of Philadelphia. I actually cold called ECW to get a couple of tapes once. And I would do this to anytime I found a phone number in like the magazines, I would call it and get some tapes. And so I watched Combat Zone. Even tried sitting through 3PW. Like this was back when indie shows were almost nothing but like garbage match extravaganzas, which I kind of got bored with it after a while and started watching more Japanese stuff. Then I moved to Japan for a couple of years.
Oh, I didn't know that.
I watched, I taught English in Japan on and off for about 3 years in the early 2000s. I watched a lot of Gaia back then. When Gaia was Chigusa Nagao's all-womenens promotion.
Right, okay.
I especially loved Sakura Hiroto, who was the queen of comedy matches, because she took a beating. Maybe some of the stiffest beatdowns I've ever seen on a single human being in a wrestling match. She took them week in and week out, and goddamn was she funny. She would cosplay goofing on other wrestlers, or if she really didn't like the person she was facing, she'd just come on regular ring and talk to this person's not worth cosplaying for. She would get people doing the wave, and then she would take the beating of a lifetime.
The Japanese women were crazy. We were watching some Aja Kong when she was doing that WWF stuff in the mid-90s, and she was just beating the piss out of those girls. Like, it was bad. Like I was watching, I think it was like the Summer Silent Night here, and she was working Alundra Blaze.
Hell of a match.
And then he was telling me about how she had some heat for it, so we watched on the network some of the Raws that followed it, and she was just kicking the shit out of those girls. Like, it was a full-out assault in the middle of the ring, and that's something the Japanese women are known for. A lot of those girls are rough, like rougher than the boys.
Well,
a lot of the girls next to you are in for a rude awakening with Kana.
Oh, okay.
I've been on a couple shows with Kana. She's fantastic, but I don't want to work her.
And that's coming from this big stiff over here.
Those head kicks are not fun.
There's a good documentary to check out called Gaia Girls. It was a Japanese documentary that a British filmmaker ended up making and did a bunch of, and subtitled it accordingly, about a group of girls that were trainees in Gaia and what they went through, and you learn just how much the respect for the business is instilled in them.
Oh yeah.
Every bit as much if not more so than here.
Way more so.
Okay.
A lot.
Yeah.
Without question, more.
Okay.
That's just the Japanese.
I don't know much about the inside with North American wrestling. All I know is when I saw the documentary, my jaw dropped.
When I was training at Tajiri's dojo, when I was in Japan, they had students in there that had been training over a year that still hadn't seen the light of a show yet. And they were way better than anybody that's been wrestling for years on these shows, but they weren't deemed ready yet. Like, there's a certain level and certain standard before they put a performer in the ring over
Absolutely, and rightly so.
100%.
I guess I got a question for everybody. What was the moment where either you knew you were ready, or the moment that your trainers or your peers decided you were ready? Did you have that moment of clarity where you're like, I can do this?
I never had the moment of clarity. I was, like I said, I started out as a teenager, so I was training before shows at Chalmers Community Club, Northway Community Club, and realistically, I probably deep down knew I wasn't ready, but the guys on the shows were fucking horrible and shit, so I was like, well, if these guys can do it, I should be able to do it too. So I was kind of always hounding the promoter, like, please give me a chance. I can't be much worse than these guys. But it wasn't, until maybe I finished my training with Gene that I really felt like, okay, I can do this. I can go in there and I can be comfortable with who I am and be comfortable with my performance out there.
Okay.
I had a distinct moment of clarity. I wrote about it several years ago, but no, whatever. I don't remember the link. But about 2 or 3 years in, we were doing a show, Selkirk Children's Fair in the winter. The Selkirk Winter Carnival. It was like the second or third year that Ernie Todd's CWE had been promoting it. We were doing the main event. It was me and Bobby J against Damage Incorporated, which nobody else will care about that. But Damage Inc. were two big motherfuckers.
Who was Damage Inc?
That was Jason Powers,
And Brian
the
Bailey?
Machine, and Brian Bailey. That's right. And they often were paired up against me to throw the other big guy around. But it was one of the first times that there was a big crowd. Well, yeah, first time with a big crowd, but there were lots of kids, lots of families, and about midway through the match, I realized not only was I over, not only were the people into the match, they were desperate to see me make a tag. And it's that real moment where you're like, that first time you're like, not only am I doing it right, I know how to tease them, I know how to keep them going, I know how to take the story on and just to really, really draw it out. We ended up having like a 25, 30-minute match. And just everything was clicking, everything was perfect. By the time we made the tag, Bobby probably got the biggest reaction he ever had his entire life. Comes in, bumps the
Bobby
heels.
J?
Bobby
That's
J.
that's every show. Just ask him.
Yeah,
He's in the night, brother.
Yeah, but I'm telling you right now, he was, this one, he was, you know, I fucking Ricky Morton his ass off. So it's I'll tell you. But it was there. Boom, boom, boom. Comes in, does the hot tag, everything. It was the first time I get to the back, and every man in the locker room was coming up. That was great. That was great. That was great. I'm like, okay. I can do this shit. I can do this.
That's like one of the best feelings as a performer when you're in the ring. Even now for me, 13 years later, when you're in, whether it's the beginning of the match, middle of the match, where you got that hold on, and you're like, we got him, brother.
Yeah,
and everything's just flowing.
Yeah.
The people are having fun. You're having fun.
It doesn't happen all the time either.
No.
Yeah, but when you have it, it's always good.
Yeah, I have it 99% of the time. I'm pretty good.
Mine was last Friday.
The people are so into this.
So I think I really had the fortunate advantage of we knew what our first match was going to be, 2-3 weeks before it happened, kind of thing. 6-7 weeks into the training, so we really just almost had dress rehearsals for that match, and every time we were getting shit on, and I quote, "You guys look like a couple of fags trying to fuck for the first time." Was thrown out there a lot. That was thrown out there a lot. It's not that there's anything wrong with that. It was
Nothing wrong with
I
that.
tell Travis that
it
every
was
day.
myself and Des Resner against Dirksen and Don DiCaprio, and then
Might be a problem.
and so then and I didn't want to let on that, but I'm thinking at the time like, fuck, are we even ready for this? But it's booked, we have to do it, and so we went through with it, and the house is behind us. It was a fair sized house because Don had that tool of his radio show to really push it, the newspaper article. So
The rest of the business was hot.
Yeah, the rest of the business was hot. Wrestling grew just because it was wrestling, period. And then anyways, afterwards, Don came down and said, okay, you know what? Couldn't have went any better. Good job, boys. You're booked on Tony's next show. And I was like, sweet, we're wrestlers,
On a side note, that's a funny thing I like about that time of the business when you listen to the guys from that era talk. They're talking about, brother, we used to pack the house, 400 people every week. And I go back, like, as a kid, I didn't know any different. To me, it was all just wrestling. But now when I go back and watch those tapes, a lot of that wrestling is fucking horrible. Like the wrestling is the wrestling has advanced so much, even on the bottom end now, to what it was then. But they're sitting there jerking themselves off. We drew these big houses. That's because the business was hot.
Yeah.
It wasn't because of anything you were
lack of
doing.
entertainment options.
To be fair, I was main eventing a lot of those shows.
The first ever local show I ever went to was Sinclair Park Community Center, and Adam Knight went through a table.
Did I?
You did, yes.
Oh, fuck.
I think Ernie's stable turned on you and put you through a table, if I recall correctly.
Was that? Oh, that's when fucking Jeff Ingram threw me to that table, isn't it? That fucking prick.
The bald guy?
Yeah, Max Impact. Yeah,
Max Impact. That was the first ever local show I ever attended.
Yeah, he beat the piss out of me for 9 minutes, and I came back to make the save as the worst babyface ever. And right, I lost my match, but I'm going to come out to make a save from the same guy who just beat the piss out of me. Wait a minute, I'm dead.
Maybe Robbie, you talk about your first wrestling show, if you can recall it, and some of your positives and not so positive memories of wrestling.
First local show, really? Not too sure actually. Probably one of yours. Maybe 2000. I'm bad with dates. Maybe it was at Maples. That's when I remember.
One of CWE's first show.
Yeah.
That was probably CWE's first show. You were there for that one.
Yeah. So
That's
one
when I
of
was-
those-
yeah, I
those
was
ones.
carried around that
So,
There was a lot of horrible shit on that show, if I recall. So maybe you can touch base on some of the things you remember, standing up. Because if you've never been to a local show before, all you've seen is WWE, WCW,
Yeah.
what were some of the noticeable difference and maybe pleasant surprises on that show from what you can remember?
Well, just, I mean, when you're taking in a live show, it's obviously different in terms of like emotion and everything like that. Even the visuals, like when you see them on TV, when you're watching WWE, everyone looks so big and, you know, larger than life, as if. But then when you're there live and everything, I mean, it's just like a person, like a real person, and it's like, oh, they look smaller, but at the same time, it's like, well, they can still put on a really good show. So, you know, it's just, it kind of takes you down a bit, I guess. But it was really, I don't really know how to say it. Like it was really good. It was really like decent. It's not.
It did blow you away.
Yeah. It was okay for my first like live wrestling show. I don't remember too much about it, but it was okay for what it was.
So
I mean, as
It was what it was.
It was what
Show, yeah, okay, great.
it was what it
I mean,
was.
you know, as time has gone along with your business and CWE, a lot of the matches have improved a lot, and a lot of good quality guys.
For all these years, I'm starting to get it a little bit.
Yeah, you started booking me.
So maybe both have been to, Round Robin's been to a million shows now. I'm not sure how many you've been to since your Primo's debut. What are some of the things that, you know, obviously, like I mentioned a second ago, there's a big difference between the guys up there and the guys down here, because there's a lot of really talented guys that could be on TV tomorrow, but there's some guys that will never ever see the light of day, and that's a good thing. So what are some distinctive negatives on an independent show you've seen that, you know, promoters like myself, wrestlers themselves can kind of take a note from and improve, coming right from the ticket buyer's mouth?
Hard to really say. You find a lot of the younger guys that especially recently, I've noticed this a few times just watching various shows, like just clips here and there all over the place. And one thing I've found is a lot of guys that just look like they wear blue jeans and a t-shirt in the ring, and that's their gimmick. And a lot of guys just don't stand out when that's all it is. Like a guy who looks like wearing a DX shirt in the ring. And call it, you know, I'm
Don't
sure
tell me Brock Lesnar's music. And,
yes, or worse. I saw one recently, a guy who was a complete knockoff of Jeff Hardy. And I'm watching this, I'm like,
that never happened. that never happened 100,000 times. No, come on.
I've seen the pictures of it. I don't know if that's
to
real.
Nate's credit, he doesn't wear the pants anymore. He's got his own shorts.
I'm not burying anybody. There.
But you get what I mean. I'm talking like a guy who dressed like Jeff Hardy circa 2003.
Yeah, for sure.
Guys, like one thing I
That was on a local show?
no, not here.
Okay.
This was on. I don't know where I think I saw a clip of this on Wrestling with Regret of all places, and
Story of my life.
and that's and he was just talking about guys that don't even try when it comes to their gimmicks. So they don't wear any ring attire whatsoever and wear their Austin 316 crap from high school. And I'm not saying a lot of people do, but it stands out when you see it. That there's no gimmick really there at all. It's kind of like when you see, especially if you see a match, like a tag match of 4 of them, which doesn't happen that often. But every so often I stumble on that. And when I see that, I think to myself, I think I'll probably fast forward through that.
It's just a guy.
Yeah, it doesn't. That's someone who doesn't really stand out. Like with all of you guys that I've seen, I haven't seen anything like that. You guys all stand out. Everyone looks like wrestlers. You know.
That brings me to an interesting question, because there's always an internal debate in the business. You know, as somebody that started the business young, I knew full well I needed to be big, I needed to be in shape, I needed to look like a wrestler if I wanted to get paid and make money like a wrestler. Right. But there's the common, theme on the independent level, like, oh, well, I just do this for fun, or, oh, it's just independent wrestling, I don't need to put in the work to look a certain way. Does it make a difference to you as a ticket buying fan how the wrestler appears physically? Does that take you out of the moment, or if they still put on that great match, does that give them a pass on it? What's your belief on what you're paying to see? If you put your money down, here's $15 for the night, should they look like wrestlers? Is it independent wrestling so you know what you're getting yourself into? What's your attitude on it?
I guess it depends on the wrestler, because guys come in all different shapes and sizes and weight classes. You see a really skinny guy, but then he goes out and like that Japanese fellow I saw in the Primo show, who just flew all over the place. Like he was a skinny little guy, didn't look like much, but he could fly. He had some moves.
So he's able to still suspend your disbelief.
Yes, and he had the wrestling attire. He looked like a guy who I expect to see in a ring. More likely with someone his own size, because once you see him fighting a 6'6", 300-pounder, the suspension of disbelief kind of disappears a little bit, unless it's a really good story in the ring. But I think
You're welcome. Losing that match.
But you get my point, though. It's like for suspension of disbelief is definitely important, but at the same time, I really think if he's doing it for fun, then they should do for fun. Treat the way they do other things for fun. Like we go to a Jet game, and a lot of guys will have the nice T-shirt or a nice jersey with the nice sewn-on numbers and stuff. And if you really enjoy doing it, it would be nice if you looked like you did. I haven't seen it that much here locally, but I have seen it with just various matches I've stumbled on. Because on YouTube you get those recommended for you, so I stumble on a lot of things because I practically live there.
But one couple, sorry.
But you get what but that's kind of how I look at it. I mean, if it doesn't matter what size they are, they don't all have to be pumped up. They can, but if they put on a good show in the ring. But at the same time, people should have a gimmick that stands out unless they're specifically told not to. Like if you're running a promotion, you got a couple guys that are really green that you have plans for later, and they look just, but they've got the tights on and all that, so they still, and they have the boots, so they still.
So Travis Cole.
or anyone else getting their start.
And I agree with that. Like that's what I mean. Like I'm understanding at this level, you're not gonna necessarily get from opening bell to end of bell everybody that looks the part. Even though I think you should, I understand that that's not always the case. And that's why with CWE I bring in so many wrestlers from all over North America, so I can get that because that's how I want my business to be perceived. Right. But at the same time, I understand not everyone's gonna be Lex Luger, not everybody's gonna be Brock Lesnar, and they don't need to be. But at the same time, if you're not one of those guys, at least cater your character and your gimmick to what you are. Play to your strengths. So you're not just a dude that's sort of out of shape but doesn't necessarily look tough. Come up with something that can then suit it and hide that. Yeah, not necessarily, I guess gear can hide that, but hey, if you gotta be Doink the Clown, you're Doink the Clown because you're not Lex Luger. There is a place for everybody if you cater to it accordingly.
Yeah. To that point, learning what your strengths are is very difficult in any walk of life. And by that I mean, I can't count the number of guys that broke into the business thinking, I am so-and-so. I am going to be the guy who goes out there and flies high or is the toughest motherfucker or this or that. And everything about them, as soon as you see them walk through the curtain, whatever they've chosen for the music, whatever the look says, whatever they do in the ring is completely wrong for them.
And a lot of time how they perceive themselves is not how everybody else does.
That's right. and they can't look themselves in the mirror and be honest about it.
Right.
And that's where guys get the most discouraged, right? It took me almost 10 years to sort of go, from the very beginning, I should have been wearing a hat, I should be wearing black, and I should stop trying to be a high flyer, I should stop trying to be a technical wrestler, just go out there and kick somebody's ass. Yeah. But it took me 8 years to sort of get comfortable enough to go,
right,
this is what I'm supposed to be doing out there. The fact that I can do all that extra stuff, yeah, that's nice. Right? There's an important aspect of being well-rounded and well-trained and being able to do a variety of matches.
100%.
But once you find your niche, I'm not saying only do that, I'm saying do that and then expand from there. Yeah. You'll find it. You will find it, but you've got to be honest with yourself and go, this is who I am and this is what I can do.
I find
that comes from a person
that
takes it seriously, and that comes in time.
Right.
And that's that will, the more you put into it, the closer you get to that.
Yeah, I find as a booker, a lot of times guys don't like to go outside their comfort zone. I can see what their strengths and weaknesses are, not only just from being in the ring with them as a wrestler, but as having experience as a booker. But a lot of time guys perceive themselves a certain way and they don't want to detour from that. So I'll come up with an idea for something. No, I'm not doing that. That's stupid. And the way I see it, you're being cast in a role that night. You know, or for that short term, whatever that might be. If I show up to a show and they say, you know, I want you to be in a chicken suit tonight and you're doing the fucking Macarena or whatever, I'm like, okay, then I'm learning the Macarena in the next 20 minutes and that's what I'm doing tonight. Because it's entertainment, it's wrestling, it's supposed to be fun. Where a lot of guys are like, no, that looks, you know, that makes me look stupid. I'm not, and I hate when people say that makes me look stupid. Because when I'm a heel, I go out of my way to be as ridiculous and stupid as I can be, because that's the fun of professional wrestling.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, where you're putting on tights and rolling around with other dudes, like it's not.
We all look stupid.
We all look stupid. If you think of the if you think of the overall concept of professional wrestling, it's kind of silly. Yeah, so have fun with it, roll with it.
Yeah.
You know, and a lot of times guys aren't willing to do that.
People don't understand that challenges and limitations are actually where the best creative and inspirational stuff comes from.
For sure.
You know, if the more times you say no to something, the less times people are going to come up to you and say, we'd like you to do something.
Exactly.
Take your challenge, make the most of it, and then come back and say, fuck you, give me something better.
A lot of people are just scared to like give something a try, you know, and like have it fail, you know, and it's just like, you know, go out and do the best of your ability with what you're given.
What you have.
Failure is success training. The more times you fail, the more times you realize, don't fucking do that, do this.
It's not. It's almost the same thing, but not like when we decided we were going to name Dick Blood. Dick Blood. He hated it.
Well,
He hated it.
I wasn't a big fan of it myself.
But I was like, trust me on this. He's like, all right, I'll give it a try. Now he's one of our most overpaid faces.
He got shirts made.
Yeah, he sells them, you know. He's one of the most popular guys we have at our bar shows. Like the people love his gimmick. They love saying his name, chanting his name. Sometimes you just gotta roll the dice with stupid bullshit and see what sticks. And that's you know, and that's how you catch fire sometimes. If you think about WWE, every wrestler breaks into wrestling wanting to wrestle in WWE, whether they say it or not.
Yeah.
Whether that changes over time is irrelevant.
Depending
They
on
start.
what the King promotion is at that time when that person starts.
Right. They want to be in WWE. If you look at WWE, you're going to have to be silly and stupid if you ever make it there. The Rock did it, Kurt Angle did it, Steve Austin did it. Anybody that John Cena does it, anybody that ends up being on television and getting a push there ends up in ridiculous bullshit comedy segments or humor segments.
Because they've got 10 hours a week of TV to fill.
Yeah,
It's
so
not all
you
gonna
got to
be
do
awesome.
it, and you got to have fun with it, because if you go out there and have fun with it, you're going to nail it, and you're going to keep getting that TV time, and that's how stars are born.
Brock Lesnar did it.
You know, Brock Lesnar, everybody's done it.
That just came to mind is when you talk about that is I'm amazed that wrestlers still have that when they're seeing guys like when Daniel Bryan's yes thing got over. I couldn't believe that got over.
That's so
as
easy.
big as it did.
But that's not even a
I
new
couldn't.
thing.
I can't believe Bailey got over randomly hugging people. I mean, but it got over and got over big.
What it comes down to at the end of the day is no matter what your gimmick is, people can smell genuine.
Yes.
Like
Yes.
when you're out there, and even if you're portraying a gimmick or whatever, but if people go, some part of this is genuine, like they really believe at some level what they're doing is exactly what they're supposed to be doing, they will gravitate to that. They will always gravitate to that.
They believe what you're selling.
They will believe what you're selling and they want to buy it, right? Bailey is doing that. Banks is doing that. You make those two examples on TV. Seth Rollins not quite there yet, but he's finding it. He's finding it. Like his talent is carrying him the rest of the way right now.
Brian, probably the best example of all in the last
That's right.
3 years.
Yeah, that's right. Brian Danielson, absolutely. John Cena, he's genuine.
Would you consider Kevin Owens as Kevin Steen / Kevin Owens
100%.
in the same
100%. You
Yes.
believe everything he's saying because he believes everything he's
Right.
saying.
Samoa Joe 10 years ago.
Even now.
Okay, I haven't seen much of him in a while.
Yeah, but he's the same. So
Okay.
You believe him.
Well, that's going to segue into our next topic of kayfabe and the reality era of wrestling. So we're going to take a quick commercial break so we can plug all our fun shows coming up that are going to scroll down your screen. You're going to mark it down, you're going to buy a ticket, you're going to come see us. So let's get to that. We'll come back and we will talk kayfabe. got some chicken, I've got a cat. We're going to talk very briefly as we run into time. Rusev and Lana, announced they were engaged. TMZ reported it, and as a result, WWE kind of scratched the angle they were doing with them feuding with each other.
Did I ever do that link from that movie Lana was in, where it's like a guy taking lines of gimmick off of Keysands?
I think you did, yeah.
Yeah. I'll put that at the bottom of the screen.
Could you send me that link? I may have missed it. It's
Yeah,
alright.
I'll text it to you tomorrow morning.
So that brings me to the question for the panel. Now we live in what they call the reality era. So a lot of real life situations, you've seen it with Daniel Bryan and his wife, John Cena with his, now transfer over into the wrestling world, where before it was wrestling and real life. They were two separate things. And now we're seeing that cross over and play a big part and influence the current product. Is that something that's yay or nay? Should we be able to Rusev and Lana, should they be able to be engaged and still be in an angle, or does that take away from the magic of professional wrestling? Or are we under the understanding now that we know it's a work, we know it's entertainment, these two should be able to play two separate characters and carry on with their real life?
I'm a fan of the latter. I think there's not a soul out there that watches wrestling that isn't aware that it's a scripted performance.
Go that far.
And
I met some fans.
Well, anyone that's gonna read into it, then that shouldn't be like, hey, why the fuck did I see these two in a restaurant together when they're heated enemies kind of thing. I think from 9:01 to 11 p.m. they're enemies, right? And then other than that, who gives a fuck? Let them get married. Let them do whatever the hell they want. I really don't think it has an effect as it did, say, 30 years ago,
right,
where you were forbidden from even being seen in public with somebody that you're involved in a feud with, or someone that's just heel face. Period. You couldn't have that. But those days are long behind us. And I think everybody's aware of that. I think as long as you're not being overly making a huge deal out of it, I think it's fine.
Yeah, I remember listening to a Chris Jericho podcast where he had Seth Rollins on, and they just wrestled in the main event of Raw that night, and then they literally just hopped on a podcast and did the recording, and they joked about that, how we were just beating each other up 10 minutes ago, now here we are talking wrestling. Adam Knight took the shit out of me last Friday night, and here we are.
And we'll be doing it again at Rookies. We'll be doing it again December 4th. And I'm of two minds about it. I really am. It's I think you can do it and still maintain that level of mystery, and I think having a level of mystery is important because that's what separates pro wrestling as entertainment from the rest of the entertainment industry, right? People, but at the end of the day, the people that really want to know this stuff are going to find out about it anyway. And when you're at the very top of any entertainment or any business echelon, what goes on behind the scenes is news. It's news, right? It doesn't matter if you're like the CEO of Google. It doesn't matter if you're like the head of any other Fortune 500 company. If you're involved at a high level in pro wrestling.
And a lot of people love the backstage stuff more than they love the actual product. Not just wrestling and everything. People love to know the gossip.
They want to know the gossip because they go, that explains why I'm seeing what I'm seeing. Well, maybe it does or maybe it doesn't, right? My biggest complaint about them doing that is that was like the most interesting storyline they were doing. I was like, we got to dump it. Everyone found out about this. And that's fine. I think it was going to end up that way anyway as far as an angle goes, right? I think at the end of the day it was going to be that we were screwing with everybody. We're back together because we're evil and we're Russian. Great, who cares, right? It's all good.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, that by itself is not an angle that was drawing the money. So, fuck it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right?
So I've had it before where people have criticized, like, your social media, you'll have something in I remember putting up a picture with Jimmy Jacobs and we were feuding in Portland and the promoter was upset about it. He's like, you're breaking kayfabe. Well, people, they know.
Or we might be promoting a show because we're saying, hey, we're both here and we're both going to be on a show in 3 hours.
Right? Like, are we at a point now where somebody's sitting at home going, you know what? I know they're not really beating each other up. I'm not going. I think if people are a fan of wrestling, they know that already and they're going. And it's not necessarily detouring people. I don't think anyone's sitting at home going, I'm not going to that fake bullshit because they're those two people. It's not Hacksaw Jim Duggan and Nigel
Rogan talks like that.
Was it Jim Cornette booking
He's the
that
only
show?
one I know of that does, but whenever Joe Rogan talks on his podcast about wrestling, that's what he says, but he usually gets blasted by about 10,000 comments whenever he does talk like that.
Fuck.
Yes, he is. Yes, he is.
He doesn't give a fuck.
He's Danny White's bitch.
He's more than that, but yeah, I know what you're saying. But
But that means he has to trash talk everything else but the UFC.
yeah, he's getting paid a lot of money.
Yeah,
We-
I tend to agree with everybody. It's 2015. You know, people who want to find out are going to find out. But I think the angle that everybody's missing that hasn't been touched on is I don't think they reacted and went, oh, you know, it got reported that they're together. This ruins our angle because kayfabe. And I think it's a situation where a hot news outlet like TMZ covered it. It's we want to use this on TV. How can we use it?
Well, then there
It's
you
that
go.
simple, right?
Yeah,
Like,
and
I don't
that's
think they were like in panic mode, like, oh no, kayfabe is ruined because
I think guys at the writing team might have gone, oh fuck, we have the next 6 weeks all planned out. Yeah, but whatever. As wrestling, you scrap that shit and you move on.
Yeah.
And that's no different. That's actually the same as the way the wrestling business has always been. We've got plans to put so and so over for the main. We got Ted DiBiase is going to win WrestleMania 4. He's going to be the World Heavyweight Champion. Holy shit, this Macho Man's pretty fucking over.
Let's switch that.
Maybe we should fucking go with the hot baby face.
At the
Right?
same time, I think you could use social media and the public in this day and age to your advantage because people think what they're seeing on social media and what they're seeing on the internet is reality. So
Yeah.
you can still
Not to
swerve
mention-
people, and
It's about
I do it all the time. Like people think what they see on the internet is me, and whether it is or isn't is another story, right? It's not for you to decide.
Well, one thing that I've noticed, I think the only thing that was bad about it was they abruptly dropped it. I think that was probably the where I think people got pissed off. But the thing that I'm noticing a lot, especially now that WWE's figured out the reality TV game, the way UFC did a few years ago with the Ultimate Fighter, which is still running, of course, and they're doing it the way they like to do it. But the thing that I'm noticing is that, let's be honest, reality TV isn't reality.
No,
No,
it
it's
never has
not.
been.
No.
No.
And I think that actually adds a layer to kayfabe that didn't exist previously. Like there was a time, I remember watching the Odd Shoot interview, where guys would talk about ripping each other in these things and then turning into an angle somewhere else, in the WWE or wherever. I think, what was it, Cactus and Ric Flair had a thing because they buried each other in each other's books. I mean, things like that. I mean, there was, you could go to the Torch and bury somebody, and then you would hear a guy say, well, I didn't mean that, I was just working. You know, which you don't know if that was legit or not from a fan standpoint because you're just reading this stuff and we're watching the fireworks.
But that again goes to the point of, you know, at the end of the day, especially with wrestling, if you say something or do something that gets a lot of attention, chances are, even if you're burying another guy, there might be interest in seeing these two guys get together.
That's right.
Knocks. You never know what's going to happen.
Exactly.
So that's just taking advantage of a real situation and turning it into an angle.
Or it was, or they were.
Well, that saved everybody's career.
Are they crazy or are they crazy like a fox? Especially in reality TV, are they nuts or are they just playing nuts?
Right.
And especially when you realize that, like when the Jersey Shore had their outtakes episode, you realize just how scripted it was. I've become kind of a reality TV junkie, so I've come to enjoy the stupidity of a lot of it.
Well, enjoy it.
It is what it is. It lets me turn my brain off for an hour. And basically, I think the same thing can be true in the WWE. Like, I'm willing to bet a lot of the crap on Total Divas is just stuff. So
All of it.
I bet you get what I mean by it. But you get,
It's
but it's different kinds of bullshit. Like, for instance, like just bullshit for the average television viewer, and then maybe bullshit that could end up on Raw. You know,
Yeah, but it doesn't bleed over. That's the one thing that they're not paying attention to, right? You know, they're trying to start angles on Total Divas that bleed over into Raw, and the people that are watching Total Divas are not watching Raw.
Well, it's just because the Total Divas is like 3 or 4 months behind or whatever.
That makes it even dumber, right?
I know a lot of women that watch that program that don't watch wrestling.
Absolutely.
So it's ridiculous.
That's what I'm saying.
Anytime I tell a girl, it's like, oh, you wrestle? It's like, oh, is that like that Total Divas? Like, I get that all the time now.
Yeah,
all the time.
That's true.
And they openly expose the business on that show as well, like that it's a work and that everyone's working
Yeah.
together and doing matches.
Yeah, they've shown
together.
them planning matches with agents before.
Have you legitimately talked to a girl?
Well,
Yeah, you just haven't had sex with
What?
You just hasn't had sex with one.
Oh, thanks.
yeah.
Yeah. I was like, wait, whoa.
Why
Why is this not on our list?
But you know, we're so open in this day and age that it's entertainment, it's a show. It'd be like saying, you know, if Katie Holmes and Tom Cruise were, you know, still together, they couldn't be against each other in a movie. Cause
Yeah,
like,
pretty
why,
much.
why can't they? Why couldn't they? You know, we know it's a work. We know it's an entertainment. We know, you know, so you know, you're suspending your disbelief for that 2 hours you're watching that program, whether it's a movie, a television show, wrestling. You know what you're getting into. So I don't see why it should be any different.
yeah. I think I don't know. It's.
Is it just so it's easier for the audience to connect to it? It's like, oh, we know they're really together, so it's just.
That might be a part of
Is
it
that
because
really-
so many guys use their real names that Tom Cruise doesn't necessarily use the name Tom Cruise in his movies.
Mhm.
Like you know, You know, I took me a long time to, when I was coaching hockey, it took me forever to convince the 12-year-olds that I was coaching that Ric Flair was actually his real name.
Misspelled and different, but yes.
But it would still be the same if you called him on the phone. So I think that actually gives it a level of intimacy that doesn't exist in traditional film or music, or, well, maybe not music, because so many people write about themselves a lot in music, but you get what I mean, television or film. So I think that might be have a little bit to do with that. I don't know.
You get some of the really good angles too. Like, I mean, if you think about like all the times when WWE has played off of real life stuff, you know, like Edge, Matt Hardy, Lita triangle or whatever, and like all that good stuff. I mean, just makes for some really good, captivating stuff, because it's like, you know that what's happening in real life, and then they're coming out to perform.
It's a double-edged sword. Like, sometimes it's not a good idea to do that. When WCW decided to run with Scott Hall as an alcoholic, that was
I'm
kind
not sure
of...
if they really ran with it.
I don't think they had an option in that. They just kind of walked around it.
But you get my point. Every so often you'll see a dud like that happen.
That happens more often than not, because you're trying to throw so much shit at the wall to see what sticks.
Right.
I think on the other side of the coin too, some guys have the best matches with the guys that they're good buddies with because of that comfort level and familiarity.
Yeah.
And I think anyone that's, any one of us that are wrestlers can attest to that. The guys you've had some of your favorite and most entertaining matches with are guys that you consider good close friends, because
at the same time, I've also had some really good matches with guys that I despise.
I was just gonna say that the other side of the coin I find too. Yeah,
It's true. It's absolutely true. The guys that I've absolutely had complete philosophical differences of opinion with.
Okay.
But you put it aside, you get in the ring, and then things get a little more interesting, and you sort of you dance on that razor's edge of, is this going to go too far or not? And the crowd usually eats it up.
We've got about what you talked about being genuine again. They can tell when
genuine.
someone's
They know when something's real. Absolutely. They always know.
We've got about 20 minutes left, so I want to specialize and direct some questions your way, seeing you're a guest on the program.
Thank you.
So let's talk some of Adam Knight's career here. I got a couple points that I'd just like you to maybe shoot from the hip on, and kind of talk as we go. And if you want to discuss further, we can. You broke in with with River City Wrestling, but you did spend some time with the CWF and Ernie Todd. Talk to us about your experiences with the Everybody's got an Ernie story.
I've got several Ernie stories. And it's so easy to bury everybody you've worked with, because you can always go, remember this time, or so-and-so did something really stupid when. When Ernie Todd got into the wrestling business in 1996, 1997, he saved it in Winnipeg. Let's call it like it is. The only other person running at the time was Tony, and Tony wasn't really running. Right? Tony had taken a break, he'd taken a breather, the WFWA wasn't running anymore, Callis was trying to get booked all over the world, so he wasn't involved in booking stuff locally anymore, so the scene was dead. River City Wrestling got sold to a guy who ended up going to jail, so it was dead, nothing was going on. Then Ernie, bit of a money mark, whatever, he had some cash, he came in, I'd like to call it Canadian Wrestling Federation. You know what? He ran a company fairly successfully off and on 5 to 10 years, right? Like up and down, right? He disappeared and came back a few times, right? So for that, I'm going to say, Ernie, thank you. Without him, none of you fucking guys would be sitting here and doing matches, because you either wouldn't be a place locally to get it done. That said, he wasn't always the easiest guy to get along with, but since he was your boss, sometimes he did stupid shit. And you weren't top angles, and you didn't get respect you thought you deserved, and all that other stuff. Point is, though, without him, you wouldn't have a wrestling business in Central Canada right now.
Simple enough.
That's fair.
But I think that's totally fair.
Yeah.
I can, like I said, you can always find stories. Lord knows there's
Oh, yeah.
100 about me, but I'm going to try to be positive.
All right. Well, this story might not be a positive story. Please tell us your heat with Mike Davidson and reclaim the night that you got into a physical altercation with the man. Because there's two sides of the story, that Adam Knight knocked him on his ass, and then there's the Mike Davidson story that he no-sold your punch.
And
So maybe-
then grabbed me in the front face like and took me down and like guillotined me.
Yeah, so
I heard
maybe
that story.
maybe you can talk about what led up to this heat, and then the actual physical altercation itself, and where you're at now.
Mike is the most immature person I've ever met.
That covers a lot of ground in the wrestling business.
Ever met. Part of it's in many ways my fault. because I was around. He broke in about the same age as you were when you broke in. The difference was he broke in with a bunch of guys who, in many ways, and I'm not, sent him on bad moral paths and encouraged bad behavior. And much like the entitlement era of today, he believed quite firmly that I don't have to pay dues, I don't have to listen to some authority figures, and I've got a better way and I'm just going to do it. And he would find enough people that would, go along with that and push him along. And when he started running shows and started putting me on them and, giving me a bit of a push, I was a bit of a mark for it, so I, stuck it out, right? The thing that bugs me the most about Mike is the fact that we were really good friends for a long time, right? Bad eggs and all that other stuff aside, I overlooked things. I overlooked the way he would, talk disrespectfully to women, act disrespectfully to women, the way he would, call up ex-girlfriends at 3 in the morning, repeatedly waking them up, and then, say, I'm not stalking her. The most self-obsessed, unable to look in the mirror and see the reality, delusional. The first guy to say, I don't want you to tell me what that other person's doing wrong, I want you to tell me what you're doing right, and then do the exact opposite of what he just said, guy I've ever met. The first guy to bury somebody else at the expense of trying to get himself over. Guy brought more crooks into the wrestling business than I even want to think about. And at the end of the day, was responsible for many things, trying to get me buried online at a time when I was starting to make some serious money and get booked out of town. And I'm fairly certain, though I can't prove it, that he's the one that called the border on me when I was crossing over, that got me pulled over, and that got a mark on my passport so that I have a hard time crossing anymore. Now, yes, it's difficult to cross the border as a professional wrestler. I don't have a work visa, so I can't do it anymore. And when that happened, there's only one person I know that could have made that call, because Ernie Todd and I don't have heat. And so when I saw him in a bar, I told everyone that had heard about it, next time I see Mike, I'm going to punch him in the face. There were several witnesses there. As he came into the bar, as I was leaving, I was working downtown my shoot job. I had a lunch break. I was 10 minutes away from the bar. Go see some of the guys that I used to bounce with. I step out the door. He comes in, and Mike's famous shit-eating grin that says, I'm smarter than you, and I know something you don't, and you can't prove it. And I just said I was done with it. He got up the stairs, shook one guy's hand, said hi to the ladies, and I popped him in the kisser. I didn't get him very good, I'm not going to lie. It wasn't my knockout punch. I'm more of a grab a guy, choke him out, and dump him on his head guy, as several people will attest to. In many shoot situations, I'm the first guy to choke him right down and take him to the ground. But I wanted to make it very clear. I was done talking. He's lucky. My first instinct was shove him down the flight of stairs. And I went, no, I'll just pop him one. He ducked. I got him, a little high in the forehead. Wasn't my best shot. But he did turtle right away and try to, take me down. That's when I grabbed the front face lock and had him cinched up here. Off in the distance, I distinctly remember a guy going, oh, come on, dude. Dude, you don't want to do that. Come on, let him go. Oh, man. Let him go now. You don't want to do that, as he backed away. Had a great tan. And then the bounce on duty Joe, who I've known and worked with for 10 years, just basically came up and said, you better let him go. So I, okay, drop him. Have a great night, everybody, and I walked out. I got a text from Mike 5 minutes later saying, I'm going to call the cops. And I said, go ahead. You're the one with harassment charge. I have never spoken to him since. Though I will say, Mike, if I see you again, I'll break your nose.
So, Mike has done various things over his time in the business. He's produced some big shows.
Hell, my biggest heat with you is because of him, because I believed he was being a bad influence on you for the longest time, and you guys were trying to work together, and you partied and did shit for a while, and you were younger, and that's fine. Eventually, you smartened up too.
Do you think overall he's been a detriment to the business
Absolutely.
or positive to the business?
Absolutely. And without him, you wouldn't have Premier Championship Wrestling, which is like going into its 14th year, which is true. At one point in time, we all worked together and made that a very hot thing. But the thing is, he'll talk about how that thing wouldn't exist without him. That thing wouldn't exist without the guys who got in John Newen's ear, God rest his soul, and convinced him to invest the money to sort of get that company started and get it up and moving. that company wouldn't exist and wouldn't have had the success it had in the first 6 months if every member of that team wasn't on board and pushing, trying to make it something more than pro wrestling was at the time in Winnipeg, right? So the success of that is never the success of one person. And nobody likes to remember the fact that as soon as things got tough and hard for him, he bailed out of that company. Mike's biggest contribution for us is showing how to get in, convince a Mark, spend a lot of money on him, believe his bullshit, and as soon as the going gets rough, going, fuck this, I can't work with you, I'm out of here.
The person that was with Mike the night you punched him was Shane Madison, who you now work with here in CWE.
I was trying to be nice.
What is your relationship with Shane Madison, and how is working with him?
I've known Jeff since 1999 when he made the debut on the same show that you guys did. Though he's not one of Don's trainees.
He's adopted.
He's adopted, yeah. You could be one of mine, kid.
More or less what it was.
Pretty much.
Well, Don DeMora boys, so I guess he's like a nephew.
Yeah. He's a cousin to me.
Matt and I did a lot of tours, just he and I for a while. We made a lot of good trips and we had a lot of fun. We've had a bunch of good matches. I've retired him twice. It's alright, I've retired a couple of guys twice. But we get along, we have both very similar and dissimilar views of the wrestling world and of life in general. But that's cool. We've got so much water under the bridge and so much history. I don't have a bad thing to say about him. He totally buried me online after I blew up my knee in Japan, but that's okay. I got over it.
That will bring me to my next segment, or my next question, I should say. Your time in Japan. The first time you went was with All Japan Pro Wrestling. There's many rumors that have circulated over the years about what happened, some of them being that you couldn't hack it or handle the training.
That's right, Phil Atlas. You said I couldn't hack it.
So let's give you the open forum right now to kind of clarify what happened and set the record straight.
Johnny Devine suggested, and I'm very glad that he did, that I go with him to Windsor and train the Can-Am camp that you're familiar with in Windsor, Ontario, under Scott Moore. One of the best weeks of wrestling my entire life. Got in the ring every day, I think, like 3 hours a day, working some top-notch talent. Got to really work and really push myself, right? I was just turned 30. Right, so almost, I would have been 10 or 11 years into wrestling. I guess 11, I'm 39 now. 10 or 11 years into wrestling, and a really good chance to go out there. I was in about the best shape I've ever been in. I was about 245, 250. But at that time, I'd still already had surgery on one knee and a bunch of other stuff going on. Demore pulled me aside and said, yeah, okay, I'll put a recommendation for you for All Japan because they're looking for big gaijin. But you're going to have to, it won't be here's your contract, here you go, you got to go and you got to earn the spot. Absolutely. I was willing to earn the spot. I had a shoot job that I hated, bills and stuff, but nothing I couldn't manage. And there was a chance to go and train in the All Japan dojo in Japan for 3 months. Right? No problem. I had 6 weeks to get ready. By the end of that 6 weeks, I was in the best shape I'd ever been in doing, I got myself up to 450 squats a day, 250 push-ups, just, all body weight stuff. I completely changed my workout routine and just went for it. Just completely went for it, to the point where every day I'm waking up thinking I'm going to pee blood because my legs are burning so bad, right? Just, like, the type of training that I've never, ever done before in my life, and I can't really do as much of anymore. Get to Japan, super happy to see me, love the size. Got in the ring with their trainees, and then I found that the way they want, because I didn't know, I trained to do squats the way I would do it if I was doing a weighted bar. Just past 90 degrees and up, just past 90 degrees and up.
Yeah.
These guys want me to keep my heels together and try to touch my ass with my heels. I'm 6'5" and 250 pounds at the time. Not the most flexible guy. I did tons of stretching going into this. But even that, my body wasn't ready for that. I got 6 days in of doing ass to heel squats and lunges and jump squats and lunges and then all the other stuff. The physical stuff was very demanding, but and I fucked up a couple times. You get into your 200th push-up of the day and you're collapsing and stuff like that. I'm human, right? You have no idea what this kind of training is like, especially just to go in there and get it done. By the 6th day, my knee had been swollen like a fucking grapefruit and purple for 3 days. I got into the training that day. I got my 400 or 500 squat and I felt it pop and it locked in the bent position and I rolled over and I was stuck there and I had this mental image of a Japanese hospital and I'm wondering if my insurance is going to cover it, and the guys tell me you got to get up, you kind of keep going, and I got up, forced my legs straight, did one more and collapsed again. What would you do? Right? said, "Do you want to go home?" I said, "No, I don't want to go home, but I gotta go home." So I did, and it was the most humbling and humiliating 13-hour flight home with your leg in this position that you've ever done. And you walk through security, and they make you ask you to take off your shoes, and you're like, "Okay, but you got to put it back on for me because I legit can't bend my knee anymore." And it was very hard. I sent an email from the Narita airport to Scott Moore thanking him for the opportunity and apologizing for embarrassing him. I did the same thing to Divine, and I don't think I've talked to either of them since, which is sad for me because I really like Divine. I hope we can, chat again in the future, but that's fine. It was very tough. I was heartbreaking. I was certain I'd quit the business. I came home, I put all my stuff, I said, "Okay, it's in the bag," I put it in the closet, I shut the door. I had to find a new job, I had to buy a new car, I had to get my whole life back in order. 2 months in, they're like, "Do you want to work? You might really short a guy in the show, do you want to do it?" My knee was back to normal size, I'd already had an MRI, I knew I was going to have surgery in 6 months. Brace it up, started doing a few matches here and there, not too many. I was out, I was, for a long time after that. It's only actually really in the last 2 or 3 years that I've actually started watching wrestling regularly again. I was completely fucked off with the whole business for the longest time.
Was there heat over the situation? Did they respond to you, Divine and
No, I got no response, and that's fine. I heard through the grapevine that there was heat because, of course, Madison's first guy to call him, and then that's when he writes the blog that buries me, and that's fine. "I wasn't burying you, bro. I was trying to put over the situation, how tough it was for you, but I kind of buried you in the process because it got me over." Whatever. It was 9 years ago. I'm an adult. Point is, right? The point is, when Tajiri's Smash Company started looking for international talent that didn't have big exposure because they were looking to build their own crew. Even though I've been wrestling semi-regularly after blowing out my knee and having, I wasn't really pushing myself. I wasn't really going for it or anything. I was just doing local shows. I wasn't really traveling. It was just, nah. But the opportunity came up. And there's that part of you that always says, you have regrets in life. And I will regret All Japan for the rest of my life. But I told myself, if I can go and just have a match, and have it be okay, then maybe I can retire and feel okay about wrestling. That was really my whole goal. It was, I want to get booked, and I want to go, and I want to be able to say, here's a swan song, here's a high enough level stage that I can go out on and feel good about it. That was my whole goal. I didn't tell anybody that. But I was like, yeah, I'm going to go, I'm going to do it, and do a job for some Japanese guy. The Akira-san was amazing. I couldn't say enough things about him. But it went really well. I trained really hard for it. I got back in shape. I did the whole thing. I know. This is not the best shape of my life, but it was tough. But I went and did it, and the match went really well. And then Tajiri's waiting for me in the back with his money man. And he's just shaking my hand. "Have you back, please, please, please. New contract coming." What would you do? Well, I'd fucking retire. Absolutely not. He's got plans. He's got ideas. That year, so 2010, I don't remember what year it was that I went to All Japan anymore, so 9 years ago. 2007?
2006.
2006, 2007? Yeah, whatever. Sounds about right. I sort of floated around for a couple years, not really doing too much. But then, yeah, so 2010, went to Japan, I think 4 or 5 more times, I don't remember. Had a whole bunch of trips to the States. I wrestled more in 2010 than I did the previous 3 years, and probably more than I've wrestled per year since. I had 85 matches that year. Yeah, and working full-time my job and all the other stuff, so and it was great. It was the best run I've ever had, and it was awesome, and I'm glad I did it, and it's kept me interested, it's kept me alive, it's kept me happy to continue to show up and beat you up for CWE or stretch guys or do stuff for PCW when I get a chance to go to Saskatchewan and do a weekend there or whatever, right? It's given me a reason to remember why I do what I do, and that's cool.
Well, we got the big positive story. Let's wrap it up with our final minute here as we go to close. Worst match or worst opponent ever and why?
You got so many stinkers you can choose from.
Shittiest guy you've been in the ring with that you never, ever, under any circumstance want to get in the ring with again?
Oh, God. He's going to be so mad at me because Johnny Pincarelli. God, he's one of the guys that helped. I was around. Like he was technically a 3 or 4 year veteran by the time I broke in, and he was no good. He was like the best he ever was the year I broke in, and then he regressed from there. And I love you, JJ. You're great. You've been a buddy of mine for 20 years, but every match I had to do, and there were 2, they were awful. just awful. I couldn't do anything with you, and I've never said that about anybody else. Guys were absolute lumps I could fucking throw around and do something with. Just awful. Like the kind of match where I come out going, please pay the people their money back. It's just, and that's not to say that he hasn't had good matches, because he had. Not with me.
Fair enough.
I don't like to think I can carry anybody. God.
Might have to book that in the near future.
God.
The redemption match.
Close second, Kenny Doll. Guy out in Alberta. I had a couple of matches with them that were in tags and they were okay. Then we had a match in Regina a couple years ago for like a week-long tour. I had 3 killer matches in a row, so you get to that, yeah, this whole week is going to be killer matches. So I'm like, all right, Kenny, we got a huge size difference. We're not going to do too much up there. What the fuck? It finally got to the point I couldn't do anything with him, so I punched him in the face and pinned him.
Oh my God. What was going on?
Everything. Wasn't listening, wasn't coordinating, wasn't cooperating, excuse me. Was blocking me when I'm just trying to like do anything. Anything. I finally just got so mad. BAM! Pin. Ref was killing himself with laughter by the end of it though. The rest of the week went downhill from there.
Well, that wraps up our program for this week. We'll be back next week. We got the CWE champion, A-list Anderson Tyson Moore, joining us. So be sure to chat some wrestling with him. So if you have any questions, submit them to info@cwecanada.ca or hit any one of us up on our social media handles that Kev's been putting in throughout the program.
Better get mine right, fucker.
Cost you. No cost.
We'll see you next